Let's jump right into this bridal makeup. Man, I loved how this glam turned out. This is our beautiful model, Lee Ann, working with us today. The first step is going in to cancel out any discoloration she has on her eyelids. And I chose to use the Danessa Myricks Color Fix product in one of the nude shades. I'm spreading a very thin layer all across her eyelid and giving myself a really great base before I go in with any eyeshadow. One of the things I really like about these Color Fix products, aside from the fact that a little goes a long way, but they do have waterproofing properties. So that is always a great thing when you're doing bridal makeup, because obviously there's going to be a lot of happy tears. So it's a perfect product for bridal makeup, in my opinion, and that's why I keep a lot of the shades in my kit. So now I'm going in with a more dense brush. This is a concealer brush from e.l.f. Cosmetics, and I'm just really buffing in that product and smoothing out any little lines that I may have left behind, to just, again, buff it really well into her skin. Now I'm moving on with the Rare Beauty highlighter. It's the one that starts with an E. I believe the name is Exhilaration, but it's one of the lightest, if not the lightest shade in the collection. And I'm just using my finger to press that product onto her lid really softly. Anytime I'm using metallics of any sort or any type of shimmer, I just find that my finger is the best way to really get the pigment on there that I want. Something to do with the warmth of our finger really helps apply these better, in my opinion. So that's what I'm doing now. Now what I'm doing is taking my Ben Nye powder compact. I've depotted it into a the kit pack holder, but it's a Ben Nye product, and I'm just taking a powder. I'm actually probably mixing more than one powder that is close to her skin tone, and I'm using that to set the just under the brow, because I didn't want any shimmer up there, so I used just a regular powder. So now I'm going in with a Patrick Ta. It's one of the all matte palettes, and I'm using a mid-toned, light to mid-tone brown to start creating that dimension on the outer edge of her eyelid. And I really take my time with this layering process, because to me it makes a big difference. It's just really soft, thin layers until you build up that dimension. So I'm going in with that same color on the other eye. You'll see me go back a few times with that same color. So um, I'll do a thin layer on both eyes, and then a lot of times I'll dip back in to the same color to just build a second layer before moving on to something slightly deeper. Um, yeah, so I'm just going back in with a second layer here and buffing it out as much as I can. taking it into the crease a little bit and buffing it out. This is where I started to go into some of more of the taupey or cool tone brown shades. So I guess I guess I should tell you that the first light to mid-tone Patrick Ta brown that I used was some of the warmer tones. So this second color choice is using some of the cooler tones, and I used a mix of a Patrick Ta and a Tarte shadow that were just sitting next to each other. And I started to deepen that dimension a little bit. You'll see that I keep this, I'm less likely to pull this up into the crease. I keep this more just on the outer edge, just so that crease doesn't get too dark. So I'm just kind of placing it where I want to go a little bit and then buffing it out in all directions. And then I'm repeating on the other side. And just like I did with that first color choice, I may go back a few times. You know, I may add a second or a third thin layer before moving on to an even deeper color. So this is me going back in with that taupey brown shade, just building up the dimension and buffing it out. Same here, until I decide to take that dimension even farther. Okay, this is where I picked an even darker color. So my third color choice, it's the darkest shades in the Patrick Ta palette. And a lot of times I just mix both of them, the warmer one and the cooler one. But I'm concentrating that deep pigment at her lash line. This is just going to add some really good dimension to the eye and excitement, especially once we have the lash and everything. But by concentrating it at the lash line and then slowly buffing it up, it's going to accentuate her eye without having to bring anything too deep up into her crease. So I'm just placing the pigment and then slowly buffing it out. And if you notice, I have a much smaller brush to help me concentrate it where I want it to be concentrated. So I liked what this shade was doing. So after getting some of the dimension on the lash line, I decided to take those same colors and just add another layer like I've been doing throughout this process and darken that outer V even more. I barely take it into the crease. It's really just more about kind of blending and softening the edges rather than I wasn't trying to go into her crease a lot. It was just kind of buffing it out as much as I could. So here I'm just going back in with the lightest brown tones, and I also mixed a little bit of the Ben Nye face powder that was close to her skin tone, just mixing those two and bringing those into the crease to make sure it's nice and soft. Like I do want a little dimension there. I just don't want anything too heavy. So you kind of see me just making sure there's no harsh lines and no harsh edges, just making sure everything is nice and soft and blended in before moving on. Here I'm going back into the darkest shades in the eyeshadow palette and I'm running it along her lash line. I was not trying to create a heavy eyeliner look, but I did want a little definition at the lash line, mostly on the outer V. You see that I don't really take it all the way in. Again, I'm keeping most of that pigment on the outer edge. I knew I was going to go in with a strip lash after this, so the main purpose was to make sure that when I put that lash on top, there was no skin or eyeshadow peeking through. And then as always, I'm going to place that pigment where I want it, close to the lash line, and I'm going to slowly blend it out, keeping the majority of the pigment on that outer edge. So anytime I'm applying eyelashes on a client, I ask them to keep their eyes open and look down and stare at one spot. I aim for the center of their lashes. I pop the center on, and then you'll see me adjust the outer edge and the inner edge. But I aim for the lash, and then I use my finger to push the eyelash band to where their eyelashes meet their eyelid skin. And then I clean up the mess underneath. I always go in with some micellar water on a Q-tip and get in those corners and lower lash line, just to make sure there's no dried residue that I can't see that could cause irritation to their eye. Next, I'm moving on to foundation. I did a mix of the um, Estee Lauder Double Wear and the Huda Beauty Faux Filter. So when I first go in, the shade was a little bit warmer. It was pretty close, but a little bit warmer than I wanted. So you'll kind of see me adjust by putting a little bit lighter, mixing a little bit of the lighter shade, which was the Double Wear, in with it to make sure I get a good match. It's important to note that when I use either of these foundations, and especially when I mix them together, that I really, really take my time blending out the thinnest layer possible. Um, that's really, I can't even explain. This video is only about 30 minutes long, but it's because I've cut a lot of the dead space out, just so that it's not boring for you guys. But I give myself a minimum of 45 minutes for a makeup application, and for something like this, it was closer to an hour. So really take your time blending things out when they need to be, and especially the foundation, so it doesn't feel heavy or cakey. You're even going to see me go down the neck and behind the ears and on the ears, just because there's going to be photos taken from every angle throughout their whole day, and you just want to make sure that you've got it blended as great as possible and that it's comfortable on them. So now I'm going in with the LYS Cream Bronzer Stick, and I'm just going to start adding some dimension. I'm going in where the sun hits her cheeks and the tops of her forehead. This particular product is actually not super, super warm. I would kind of categorize it more of a bronzer, where it's like a bronzer and a contour shade mixed together. But regardless, it blends out really beautiful, and it does add the definition that I wanted. So here I'm going in and I'm adding some of that bronzer color on her nose. I was not trying to change the shape of her nose. She has a great nose. And that's not something we were wanting to do. But anytime you add color on one place of the face, it's a good idea to add it on at least one other. It just keeps everything nice and cohesive. So I'm kind of following the natural contours of her nose, and I'm just making sure that I've got that pigment in the center of her face so it doesn't look funny just being on her cheeks. So, and then now I'm just blending it out. Now I'm going in with some concealer. I used the Tarte Shape Tape, And like I do with pretty much everything, I go in with the thinnest layer as possible. So um, I'm just taking that under her eye and sort of down the sides of her nose and just brightening up that area really well. So here I did take a little bit of that concealer and put it down the center of her nose. For the same reason I put the bronzer color on her nose, just to enhance that natural definition and just make sure that I've got that Shape Tape color in more than one place on her face, so it's nice and cohesive. Now I'm going back in with my concealer brush and I'm just starting by blending out the edges, and then I'll slowly make my way in and just take my time blending it in nice and well. So I decided to use my finger to blend in the little bit that I had on her nose. If I would have used the brush, it would have put too much of that pigment in. Could have looked a little silly, so I just used my finger. And I'm also using my finger, the warmth of my finger, to really get in there and make sure that any little creases are blended out as much as possible before I go in and set it. The setting powder that I used for her is the RCMA No Color Powder. To set the rest of her face, I'm going in with the same RCMA No Color Powder. I've just switched to a bigger brush. I'm also setting down her neck, especially for brides and really anyone that you put, when you bring foundation or concealer down there, you want to make sure you set that as well so it doesn't transfer onto their clothing. Now moving on to brows. She's got great brows, but I just used the NYX brow pencil. My favorites are taupe and ash brown. Those two colors I can actually use on just about anyone. But I'm just going in and filling in any sparse areas with this pencil. And then later on, I'll go in with the Anastasia Beverly Hills powder to soften it a little bit. For whatever reason, I really like to define the lower line of the brows. You can kind of see me doing that, and then I'll leave the top slightly more fluffy. So I typically start at either the tail or the bottom line of the brow, and then see I've switched to the Anastasia Beverly Hills brow powder here. But I kind of define that bottom line and then softly flick up, and I just like the way that that looks. All right, moving on to using the Rare Beauty highlighter as an actual highlight. When I think about it, I actually started laying my highlight underneath my powder, bronzer, and blush. I just feel like it has a more lit within look. Yeah, so I'm just going in and I'm putting it on the little tip of her nose and the high points of her cheek. I love this highlighter, but it is a much stronger highlighter, so it needs to be someone that appreciates it. And now I'm also taking it in her inner corner. For bronzer, I'm going in with the Hourglass. These are the holiday palettes. I depot them. I know that's highly, people either love it or hate it. They are beautiful palettes, but for a makeup artist that carries a lot, it's just better for me to take them out. So anyways, once again, I'm mixing. So I'm mixing some of the bronzer tones and then some of the skin finishes to I just swirl it all together, and that's how I get this bronze look on her, taking it on the cheeks and her forehead. And of course, just a little bit on the nose. Oh, now I'm going in with my favorite blush duo right now. So it's the first layer is the Maybelline, it's a Maybelline blush, and it's just called Nude. And then I'm going to top it with the Hourglass blush in Sublime Flush, which is, this combo has definitely been the win in 2024 for me. But don't worry, I'll end up adding a third shade of blush later on in the application, just because there's not enough blush in this world. This Sublime Flush color by Hourglass, I accidentally bought, and I'm really glad I did because it immediately became one of my favorite blushes. But the website says it has lavender tones to it, which mimic a natural flush, and it's just beautiful. You see me kind of taking it on the sides of her face a little bit and down her neck too. I'm making sure everything is nice and cohesive. So I'm going back in with those eyeshadow colors, and I'm just smoking out her bottom lash line just a smidge. Here I actually pulled out my Dior Quad, and I'm using that dark brown shade just to add a little bit of interest to the lower lash line. I'm mostly placing it right under where her pupil is. Now moving on to lips, I use the LA Girl Sugar and Spice shade. These are really creamy. I like how they go on. So I'm just going to take some time to line her lips and then blend it in a little bit. Now I'm going in with a cream lipstick from L'Oreal. Oh, I think it is called Fairest Nude. Yeah, I'm using Fairest Nude and I am getting that all over her lip. Now I'm going back in with that lip liner just to make sure I've got enough definition on the lip. So I'm just going back in lightly before going in with a clear gloss. Next, I'm going in with some waterproof mascara. I'm not super picky about mascaras. The L'Oreal waterproof ones have always done me well, so I have kept them in my kit. My main purpose, you'll see me, I have them look down and I press their real lashes into the fake lash. I'm trying to kind of make sure nothing's poking them in the eye, and I'm making sure that they're coated really well so they look nice and cohesive. Blush is always the first to go, so I definitely wanted to add a little bit more. I wanted to mix a little bit more of a peachy tone in with the pink, and that's exactly what I did. I'm just kind of going on top and making sure she has a great bridal flush. Last step for me is just taking that powder brush that I had. I did not go back in with any more powder. I just used whatever's left on the brush, and I'm just kind of going around the edges to make sure that everything's nice and soft and there's no harsh lines in any part of the face. And that concludes our bridal look. I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's anything you want to see, let me know. Or if you have any questions or comments, let me know down below, and I'll see you guys next time.